Welcome back to Psych Thrive. I am your host, Dr. Kristen Casey. I'm a clinical psychologist, career coach, and business consultant. Today we're going to be talking about how to ace that interview for a Psy.D program, a doctorate program in clinical psychology. There's a couple of different things to keep in mind when you're interviewing for these positions. I have a list of things that I focused on during my interviews that might be really helpful. So the first thing to keep in mind is that the minute that you walk onto campus is when the interview begins. So don't mind my dog again. Of course, he always likes to come in here when I'm doing these videos. So when you get onto the campus, you're really going to be observed in every aspect, how you interact with other people, how you interact with maybe the staff, the receptionists. This is all data. Think about it. As psychologists, we study human behavior. So all of these things will be important. So, if you come into campus and you're a little rude to the receptionist, that might not go over so well. So keeping in mind that the interview starts the minute that you get on campus. The second thing that I really tried to keep in mind for me personally, because I had issues with this, was faking it till you make it in terms of confidence. When we go through interviews, a lot of times we think we're under the microscope and we have to say the right thing and we really have to get everything perfect, when in fact, we're all human. We make mistakes, we stutter, sometimes we say a lot, I know I do. There are a lot of things that we could improve in terms of, communicating or interviewing, but at the same time, it's really important to be human as well. So they're interviewing you to get a good information about who you are as a person, but also they want you to recognize that nobody's perfect, right? So if you come in and you're trying to be as perfect as possible and, all of your ducks are in a row, of course that's helpful, but then as an interviewer, in my mind, I would think, okay, and where are their growth edges? If everything is so perfect, then why are you here? You should be here to learn. So that's something that I always had to keep in mind too of, it doesn't have to be perfect. Maintaining a certain level of confidence is important, and being self-assured and being decisive with certain things, but also we're not all perfect. So showing a little bit of human aspect was really helpful in my experience. That being said, effective eye contact is always helpful as well. We all know with psych research that, eye contact varies based on culture. So some cultures feel, that hard eye contact is rude. Other cultures feel that it's respectful. So in my experience, I noticed that I did have trouble maintaining eye contact just in general, because when I would get nervous, I would kind of like divert or whatever. That has improved over time dramatically. But in the interview, I really tried to maintain a solid level of eye contact so that they saw that I was interested. The next thing that I did was not talk so fast. So these are all very basic tips, but they do make a big difference in an interview. If you know that you have a tendency to talk very fast, trying to rehearse talking a little slower just so that people could kind of grasp onto what you're saying. Also, you might be interviewing at a PsyD program that's not in the same state that you grew up in. For example, I grew up in New York, New Jersey area, and we have a tendency to talk extremely fast. Now I'm in Kansas City, so it's a little different. Not that the people are slower, but people actually listen to respond. They actually, they talk a little slower in my experience. And it's actually kind of a relief for me. So I feel like I don't have to perform nearly as quickly. So depending on, gauging where you're going to be interviewing is important, and taking note of that culture, not to make generalizations, just so that you're going to be able to deliver the information to the interviewers or the interview team in a way that they'll be able to digest and understand. Let's see. Another one is to make sure that you ask questions. So at the end of an interview, I noticed, just with my experience being interviewed and interviewing other people, is that they're just so ready for it to be over, or they're just so ready to know, hey, did I get the position, that sometimes they forget to ask questions. And this is really important, because think about the reason why people ask questions. They ask questions to gain more information, and also you're interviewing them as well. So I know the power differential feels a little lopsided here, but it's important to make sure that this program is a good fit for you. So if you're asking questions about the program, or maybe how satisfied students are, and you're getting information that is helpful, great. That kind of aligns with your values, your professional goals. That's amazing. If you're getting information that feels awkward, or information that kind of feels a little off, that's always something to note. Hey, at least I asked that question and I got valuable information from this interview about maybe what this program has to offer. So that's another really, really important thing. So I actually wrote down 3 questions at the end, or before I interviewed, I wrote down 3 questions to ask at the end if they didn't come up throughout the interview, just so that I would be able to have something to say. And in my experience, I had one question that was kind of vague, like, what do other students report as a result of being in this program? What are the good things that they have to say? What are the neutral things they have to say? And then kind of like a spicy question is students who were dissatisfied with the program, what were their reasons? Sometimes it's good to gauge, hey, what are the grievances that students have? So that you could at least identify, hey, this was a problem area, and the interviewers or the school, could show you, hey, this is how we resolve this situation. This is what we're willing to do for our students. And the last thing that I focused on in terms of just non-behavioral cues was managing my own performance anxiety. So a lot of people know about the bell curve of anxiety. So as anxiety goes up, performance goes up, but gets to a certain point where performance actually suffers when we're extremely anxious. So engaging in deep breathing, engaging that parasympathetic nervous system is going to be really important to maintain that solid level of performance where anxiety won't implicate things for you. So I practice deep breathing, and as much as you practice, when you get in there, you might start to feel your heart flutter, and that's okay. It's very normal. And if you weren't anxious in an interview, hey, maybe that's also telling. Maybe you don't really care about the program, or maybe you feel comfortable. But either way, if you do have anxiety, it's always important to really kind of focus in on that. Now, in terms of the questions that I got asked, every program is very different. So if you apply to a PhD program, a Psy.D program, those questions might differ. And then even within Psy.D programs, each program is so different in what they have to offer, right? And they're also looking for different things. So if a Psy.D program is a scholar practitioner model and another program is like a scientist-based model, they might have different questions that they ask you. For example, the scientist-based model, they might ask you more questions about, research. I'm making this up. The other Psy.D program, who's a practitioner scholar model, they might ask you how you feel in the room with another patient, or how you feel delivering, maybe not so good news to a patient, things like that. So these are harsh generalizations, not to say that that's the only questions that they ask, but gauge the school that you're applying to, and then potentially gauge the questions that they might ask. So I applied to, and I got into and graduated from a practitioner scholar model school. It was APA accredited. They really focused on, maintaining a good therapeutic rapport with a patient, a lot of research and evidence to support, the psychotherapy modalities that we use and all that stuff. These interview questions are going to be really important to either not only remember, but to nail, because you'll have interviews throughout your Psy.D program for internship, maybe fellowship, practicum sites, things like that. So these interview skills aren't just a one and done type of thing. They're really important. So the questions that they asked me was, what's your interest in the program? What are you hoping to gain from the program? And my program was a for-profit school. So they asked me, how are you going to afford this? It's a lot of money. So I thought that was a great question, because it really is important to know, how am I going to afford this? And then my subsequent question was, what are the resources for students, the financial resources? So that was like a really good information for me. Another question was, I had a master's at the time, so what did you focus on in your master's program? What are your research interests? What challenges do you experience with working with other people? Are you a team player? Are you able to commingle with other people? These are really important questions for a school to ask, and it's really important for you to know these answers before you even get in there, because you might work really well with people, but the certain type of person might trigger you, right? And anticipating maybe what they'll ask and having a response based on your own experience is important. For example, if I have really good experiences working on a team, but for some reason I have issues with a type of person that tends to be overly critical, and I take that and I'm insecure, and then I can't perform the way that I normally would, that would be something that I would have to note, right? It's important for the school to know, also important for me for, being in the psychology field, because we work with people all day. So constructing an idea of, actually, when that happens to me, I tend to shut down, but, I notice if I engage in meditation tactics that I'm able to kind of bounce back, and I'm able to kind of put things in perspective. So being able to rehearse these questions is important. So those were the main ones that they asked me. They were pretty general. They did ask me more detailed ones. To be honest with you, I can't remember. I don't have them on my list. But other things to keep in mind would be, what are your interests? What sort of internship site are you looking for? Are you open to being okay with the fact that you might not get the internship site that you're looking for? You might not get the practicum sites that you're hoping for in terms of the specialized experience. I think that's a huge preconceived notion. Before we get into Psy.D programs, we want to hyper-focus on this one area. And that's good and all, but we also have to deal with patients that we might not be so comfortable seeing. It's really good for growth. When I was in it, I'm hearing myself say this now, and when I was in it, I didn't like hearing that because I was like, no, I want to work with this one population, But looking back, it was one of the most invaluable experiences I've ever had, is working with patients that I didn't think I would be okay working with because I wasn't confident in working with them. So, managing expectations is going to be a big one. But overall, rehearsing, maintaining good eye contact, all the things that we talked about, nonverbals is really important. Also constructing questions for them, and then also anticipating questions that they might ask and rehearsing those answers, and realizing that they're going to ask you the question about what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. And if you say your weakness is nothing, that's really not a good look. So coming up with a realistic idea of maybe your growth edges and where you have to learn, because when we apply to these programs, we're here to learn, right? So I hope this helped. Really vague, open-ended questions usually. And if they ask closed-ended questions, one thing that one of my mentors told me was, even if it's a closed-ended question, don't just answer with one answer. Like if they say, is this the only Psy.D program you applied to? And you say yes, and then you don't say anything else. It's like they're wondering, So anyway, hopefully this helped. Like and subscribe. I'm now getting to the point where I'm posting at least twice a week. So it's for aspiring psychologists, newer therapists, and sooner or later we're going to be talking about mental health stigma. So stay tuned, like and subscribe. Thanks.